Lancers, I apologize on the short notice of this mission posting. Ordinarily we'd have a longer interview, but things are developing at a pace and we need a response team ASAP. A distress signal was sent from the Okla mining colony a few days ago. Some kind of riot was taking place and its security seemed like it was being overrun. However, since then we've discovered some form of infection has been spreading throughout the colony. But we're short on details, as the colony has gone into some form of lockdown, and the NHP which runs it has sent out AI units to attack anything that approaches. We already lost a recon team just trying to reach the entrance. Glacial Corp, the company that owns the colony, has been uncooperative and have even threatened to sue us if we interfere. Fortunately, because of the clear evidence of harm, they can't stop us from sending you in. Your priority is to rescue any survivors, to determine exactly what has happened inside the colony, and if you can, put a stop to it. Admiral Dravov. Welcome to the Lancer horror mission, What Lies Beneath. Designed as an investigation and endurance game, the players must delve into the depths of Okla and discover its dark secrets, whilst trying to end the nightmare haunting it before it consumes them. This video will serve as an overview of the mission, how to run it, and tips on how to make it a spooky experience for your players. The sitreps are balanced for license level 2 for 5 players, and while it's designed as a one-off game, it could be easily integrated into a longer form campaign. If you are a player interested in playing this mission, then send this video to your GM, but otherwise stop watching now, as we're very quickly going to get into spoilers. So for this overview, I'll go over the events of the game in order of how it's played, and at the end of the video, I'll summarize the background details and lore. All the tokens I put together for this mission are up on the Retrograde website. They're all animated to give them that extra spooky edge, but I'll also include a link in the description to a larger WebM file, which are good to use for Foundry. To run this mission as designed, you'll need enhanced combat, as I used some sitreps and NPCs from there. For the maps, I used an isometric setup, mainly using Starlight Furnace assets and some others I bought. But so long as you get the general gist of the maps and their intentions, it should be simple enough to recreate them. First of all then, let's talk about the balance and general intent of the mission. Separated into 5 fights, one of the main challenges for the players is to pace their resources out to survive across all the encounters. The encounters themselves are designed to apply pressure onto the players, to force them to go for objectives in order to avoid too much damage. So before getting into the mission, I would advise telling your players it is an endurance challenge. One of the consequences of this design is that it's actually a good idea for someone to use a core power in each fight, as they're less likely to be useful in the last fight. So if you see someone holding onto their core power just in case, don't be afraid to kind of nudge them to use it if it would really help their current situation. Before the game begins, if this is a one-off game or if you just like a little party tension, present your players with the following personal optional objectives. This is to help create a feeling of mistrust and conspiracy and give your players a personal motivator why they're interested in the mission. During the overview, I'll point out spots that are good for resolving some of these questions, but these are also a good opportunity for you and your players to add new details and twists of your own into the mission. The mission starts in Admiral Dravov's office on his ship, addressing the Lancer pilots for the first time. Here the players can introduce themselves and describe their appearance for one another, and even show off their attitude towards authority like the Admiral. He explains the situation and a little bit of the background of the colony, and does his best to answer any questions the players might have. The important points are: the Okla mining colony has about 1,000 people living there. It extracts basic resources, nothing too fancy. It was originally an independent colony, but after a workers' strike about 2 years ago, it almost shut down. Afterwards, it was bought by Glacial Corp. A week ago, a distress signal was sent from the colony, But as the Admiral's ship got closer, they managed to pick up some distressing messages about an infection. Since then, all communication in and out of the colony has been cut off. They sent a first response team down, but they got taken out by anti-air guns and what appear to be NHP-controlled Comcom units. In order to avoid the anti-air guns, the Lancers will be dropped from orbit in little pods. He doesn't know what the nature of this infection is, but he seems to have an inclination that it could be really bad. To protect the players, a special hazmat suit will be provided in order to keep them safe from any possible form of infection. Glacial Corp, the owners of the mine, have downplayed the severity of the situation and just declared it an internal security issue they are resolving. But they cannot stop the Lancers from going in as an emergency response team. Once the players have finished their questions, the Admiral will send them off to a side room where highly advanced hazmat suits have been prepared for them. The Admiral makes the case that wearing these are non-negotiable. They need to cover all the bases so the players themselves don't get infected. Anyone casually observing the suits will notice they are very high quality and high tech. They are partially spacesuits and even have straw systems, so packets of food and drink can be ingested without opening the suit. It can even fit over their current outfits and armor. The only odd part is while the players are putting these on, there's some techs that are taking readings of all of them. A small investigation shows that the ship should be able to get a detailed health scan of the players while they have these suits on. If a player investigates further with a very good roll, take them to a secret chat and tell them this extra detail. In the event of the pilot's death, the suit will be able to temporarily copy their brain in an AI simulacrum and use the suit to move their dead body around before burning out after the mission concludes. This is clearly a final failsafe to ensure the mission is completed regardless of the state of the pilots. This is to add a little fun horror element for later. If one of the pilots does end up dying, they have the option of continuing anyway, but with the fun interaction that they can drop hints that they're actually dead. If the player doesn't share this with the party, that makes for a fun surprise later. But if they do, it informs them that the Admiral thinks they could all die, which gives a good hint how dangerous this could get. Once the players are suited up, they can go to the hangar, show off and describe their mechs, and discuss the mission amongst themselves. Once they're ready, the Admiral will appear to show them a hologram of the entrance of the underground colony and our first sitrep map. So the very first sitrep of What Lies Beneath is a combination of a signal chase from enhanced combat and an extraction. Basically, in order to enter the underground colony, which has been shut tight by the NHP, the players will need to hack open the door. The Admiral from their ship can tell them that they have a hacker team who reckon they can do it, but they need the players to bounce the signal for them so they can access it. So essentially, what happens is, as part of the signal chase, the objective initially begins in the middle of the map, a burst 2 area, like so. So what happens as part of the signal chase is this objective zone will bounce around the map. The enemy will start behind these barricades near the door, which means that if the signal bounces into their area, it'll be very difficult for the players to control it. So my advice would be that the barricades bounce the signal so it can't land in the enemy deployment zone. As part of the mission briefing, Admiral Dravo will also tell the players that he can launch smoke down onto the battlefield because it's quite an open battlefield on purpose for this reason, and that he can deploy burst 1 areas, free burst 1 areas of smoke, like so. So the players can determine where they want these areas of soft cover to be even before the fight starts. And these pieces of soft cover will last for 3 turns. The first objective then is for the players to control this signal zone for 3 turns, a maximum of 3 turns. If they do, then at the north end here, this tunnel will open. Once everyone's in the extraction zone, the sitrep ends immediately, as the door will quickly seal behind them. As part of this objective, though, you have these two bunkers with guns on top of them. These serve as bonus objectives. If the players can destroy these guns, then they will receive a bonus later on during the mission to help them out. So that's a very good bonus to get. And the player's deployment zone is the entire south of the map. When they orbital drop, they kind of roll up towards the bunker entrance and prepare to breach. As soon as the fight actually starts, we reveal the enemy encounter, who look like this. Now, each of these units, except for the Aegis in the middle, all have the RPV tag, which means that they get extra HP, and they also have an innate impairment, unless they get put in the Aegis's defensive net, which removes that condition. So the Aegis kind of serves as the battlefield commander for these robots. The point of this encounter is all the NPCs are quite tanky because of the extra health, but they don't necessarily do that much damage, but they do have the capability of doing consistent damage. For example, the archers are in a good defensive position and they do reliable damage. So even if the players hide in the soft cover, unless they have high armor, they're gonna get plinked with some damage. And the engineers at the back move forward as the battle progresses, printing out turrets. So unless the players are keeping on top of taking out the turrets, these guys will be able to do a lot of damage to them. What's interesting about this fight is the two anti-air guns at the back on top of the bunkers. They both have 15 health, which is technically less than any of the NPCs, making them a much more viable target. And that is by design, because you want the players to be incentivized to go for the bonus objective if they feel like they've got good control over the field. During the fight, whenever the Aegis takes its turn, you can also have it talk, because it is being controlled by the NHP inside the bunker. And the NHP is strange, because it seems to have like two personalities. So for one turn, it will have a feminine voice and inviting people to the Okla mining station where dreams are made. You know, it's doing all this kind of very positive messaging, like, here we build the future together, here we'll strive for a better life for all of us, you know, all that good messaging. And then on every off turn, its voice will change to a masculine one, immediately berates the players as if they are prisoners, and they have to follow the rules, and that infractions will be severely punished. This is the first clue for the players that what people know about this mining colony is not accurate. So once the players are through the bunker door, they enter a long cavernous hallway with a metal road underneath them. All the lights are completely off. It is pitch black in this place, eventually revealing a small city underground that is in complete disrepair. There are barely any lights on, just occasional flickers. It is utterly silent save for the stomping of automatic mechs patrolling the streets. And these mechs don't react to the players at all, and they all seem to be pyros. And they're completely uninterested, but they're following a very basic pattern, a very basic patrol pattern around this city. What's very strange about the initial impression of the city is parts of buildings look like they've been ripped off, and there are no bodies at all. It is completely empty of blood and gore or anything of that nature. Silent and empty, save for the haunting footsteps of soulless machines. So here is my map of the colony. It's circular in nature, completely underground, but it also has these weird, like sectioned off cavern areas that only have like a small narrow passage to enter either of them on the eastern side. The bigger tunnels, which have light actually streaming out from them, these are purely mining tunnels. There's nothing of like terrible interest in these other than the fact that they seem to go on for like miles. These are the main tunnels of extracted ore. Entering what appears to be a massive labyrinth, you would get lost in there almost instantly. So when the players first arrive here, their first priority is going to be to find a safe spot, and the safest spot here is in the middle, this little building here. It seems to be a factory, or at least a printing shop for mining equipment, but the rooftop is high enough that it makes for a very good defensive position. And this is the kind of like downtime roleplay zone I use between each of the fights. So this is the rooftop I use, and I place all of the players' mechs around the place, and then they can discuss their findings and theories here in between each of the fights. And is also like the possibility of gaining some extra material here for repairs. It's all like mining equipment that's licensed to be print here, and there's not really like enough time to print off major stuff. But if a player is inventive enough, or you're feeling charitable, maybe there's something they can get out of that. So after scanning the place and looking around a little bit, the players will find the following areas. This red and green box appear to be tunnels leading to other sections of the colony that are completely full of guns and explosives and traps. They are, for all intents and purposes, nearly impassable. And for the time being, it's not obvious what is behind these areas. But of note, the red one is much more heavily defended with much more advanced countermeasures. The dark blue box represents the administrative building, which is usually the player's first point of investigation. And this orange box represents the colony's power system, which seems to be flickering. And that's usually a good sign that that should be investigated. The administrative building location is an opportunity for pilot action, and also to do a little creepy horror stuff. When the players first enter the administrative building, the first thing they see is an empty kind of greeting room. There's a desk, even a hologram of the planet, distorted and kind of blinking because of the power disruptions. And there's also a pair of doors, one at the back of the room and one on the right. The door at the back of the room is completely sealed, and it has all the hallmarks of a heavy security door that has been slammed shut in order to stop any possible entry. It's the equivalent of like a vault bulkhead door. You know, you would need significant explosives to get through this. And there are signs that there was some kind of encounter in the lobby because there's a bit of damage on this door, as if people were trying to get through it. The door on the right, on the other hand, leads into some simple office area. There's nothing particularly interesting at this level. The only things you could really glean from the computers here are various orders for equipment, for basic equipment, and the basic functions of the colony, but nothing about its overall administrative management. As the players explore around, they find that the circuitry in this building has been terribly compromised, and that in that right-hand area, there is a major power line going through one of the toilet areas. And so it's going to require one of the players to sit in that toilet room and manually adjust the power in order to stop the fluctuations. So they have to sit there and keep doing it. And if they do, they're able to open the door at the back of the lobby, allowing the rest of the party to go investigate. Now, obviously, anyone who's enjoyed any kind of horror may find this setup a little suspicious. And that is because it is. Because the purpose of this location is to try to get one of the players to separate from the rest of the group and catch them when they're alone. As the back lobby door opens, the next thing the group can see is a hallway where someone has scrawled in blood on the wall, "Liars." And stepping further in, you begin to see more management computers and access. This is where the players can, if they want, just kind of like learn little bits and pieces about day-to-day life in the colony. Whilst they're investigating that, try to create a situation where one of the players is left by themselves. This usually happens to the person who's doing the toilet stuff, because if another player stays with them, there's a good chance they might become interested in what's going on in other rooms, or you can even like create a noise for them to go investigate. The instant when one of the players is by themselves is when the monster strikes. So what is the monster? Well, let's assume that we're catching the player who's been left in the toilet by themselves. Take them away to a secret chat, tell them that a thick black water with red marks has begun to pour from one of the taps. As it progresses, this liquid quickly expanding and forming just this blob of black and red tendrils. And then you can have the player roll to not get gotten by this thing. If you can get one of the players attacked by this thing and they fail their checks or otherwise are not able to completely avoid this creature, then you can present them with the following choice. So now I'm a component of, especially when it comes to like a one-off horror game, of giving some of the agency back over to the players so they can kind of play the horror game they're interested in. So one of the consequences of being attacked by this creature is if it makes contact with them, it goes straight through the suit. It doesn't care that its goo-like material just passes right through, hits them in the flesh, and then the player, you can ask the player to decide, are they instantly killed or do they want to just become infected? If they are instantly killed, then physical contact with this creature immediately devours all of their skin and organs. They are a skeleton inside that hazmat suit now. But of course, if they had the hazmat suit on, they can still continue to play as their character. Alternatively, they get just nicked by this thing and become infected, which does not have any immediate consequences, but now they've got a little bit of a ticking clock. Once this creature has kind of been revealed to at least one player, you can, if you want, have it appear again and start chasing them around this building, or however you want to design this kind of horror office encounter. But the end goal of this encounter is to get to the founder's office. After a player has been attacked by this, they will probably, yell or fire their gun, so everyone else comes running. And whilst everyone isn't looking, something cleans that blood stain off the wall, wipes it clean, leaving only a kind of oily black residue behind. The blood only gets cleared away now because whatever these things are could not get into this part of the building because of the bulkhead doors. But now the players have opened it, and now they can. As the players open the founder's office, the first immediate thing they can see is a body for the first time. of the founder sitting in his chair, a big hole through his head, and a gun on his desk, with a holographic message displaying in front of him, which just reads, "I'm sorry." Grabbing his administrative tablet, the players, maybe with a little hacking, will be able to access a lot more information about the colony. But it becomes very obvious quickly that the founder has been locked out of most of the colony's systems. And there's an exchange of messages between him and some representative of Glacial Corp, and him complaining about the conditions and treatment of the prisoners. Within his administrative tablet, there is also information about each of the colonists who live here, and it even tracks their health status and locations, the location of which, for every single one of them, reads as out of bounds. After a bit of investigation or hacking, the players can access a bit more additional information about the colonists, as it very quickly revealed that the majority of them are actually prisoners with various listed crimes associated with them, as well as the security staff. Only 2 people in this list are registered as being at a location. A figure called the Warden and a prisoner by the name of Sabrina. The Warden's location is revealed to be here, past the heavy armaments protecting this area. Sabrina's, on the other hand, is this building here, which, when the players arrive at it, will discover it's some form of solitary confinement. When the players go to investigate the power plant, they find it in dire straits, because not only is one of the 2 reactors missing, but the remaining reactor is going into meltdown because of the power drain and because of nobody's been managing it for about a week. So here you can present your players an engineering challenge to see if they can prevent the remaining reactor from going into meltdown in the next 24 hours. If the players have already encountered the creature by this point, I don't tend to make this like an action sequence, but just a series of maybe engineering checks to show off who amongst the party is a trained nuclear fission. But I tend to keep the tension up by having the water pipes make strange noises or something in the dark reaching out at the players when they're by themselves. Investigating the power plant, the players can learn a couple details. One is there is 3 sources of massive power drain. One going into the red area and powering the defenses down that corridor, and one going to the green area at top, similarly powering the defenses there. The 3rd power drain source, though, is hidden. There's no signs on the map where this 3rd power drain is even coming from, only that it seems to be forcibly taking as much power as it can. So the situation you want to present to your players is they could shut down either of the red or green area fairly easily, but each power drain source they shut down, this 3rd hidden source will take the extra power. This is to create the choice between which of these weapon areas do they disable, and the one they don't disable, they'll need to either find one of the alternative ways to bypass it or work out a way to bypass it themselves. Investigating the power station further, the players might be able to find the computers, which have all been damaged. Many of them have bullet holes in them, as if somebody was very quickly trying to wipe everything. But if the players are able to do a bit of repairs or a good bit of hacking, they will be able to recover a message about Operation Meltdown being initiated. From the messages, though, it's not entirely clear what that is, only something has happened and the Warden has activated Operation Meltdown. If the players discover the solitary confinement prison down here, then when first arriving at it, they find that it's guarded by a pair of anti-personnel turrets. Now, Fortunately, these turrets are actually out of ammo, but you could have a funny situation where somebody walks up to it, they pop out, start spinning, and making clicking noises at them. Breaking through the front door isn't too difficult, but inside the hallways, there are more of these turrets, and they do have bullets. So the players just need to come up with an idea of how to circumvent them. If the players are able to hack into the cameras, they can actually look into each of the cells, all of which are empty save for one of them, which holds Zabrina, who is a large scarred woman with big tattoos all over her arms. Zabrina is a fairly hardened criminal. She's definitely some form of like ex-pirate or something. If questioned, she'll obviously downplay her own criminal actions, but otherwise she doesn't know what's been occurring over the last couple days, as she was thrown into this solitary confinement cell before everything kicked off. And the cell is completely sealed and even soundproof. She hasn't even heard anything that's been happening outside. The only way she's been able to determine how long it's been is by the amount of automatic meals that have been printed for her. She can reveal that there is definitely some kind of hidden lab in the colony. Everyone apparently knew about it, but since she was a prisoner and kept in the prison area, which turns out to be this northern green area, she's never seen it personally. But that whenever somebody got sick, they would be taken away from the prisons. If asked to describe the sickness, all she knows about it is people would start acting weirdly and mumble that something was talking to them. If asked about any possible survivors, Zabrina can tell the party that the prisoners, that underneath the prison, there is a mining area. It was kind of made as a kind of solitary mining place to kind of punish the prisoners if they got out of line and set them to work endlessly. But the prisoners began to use it as a hiding space for their supplies for when they were getting prepared for a prison break. And she can tell the players that if any of the prisoners survived, they're likely holed up down there. Now, Zabrina will try to hide this next detail, but she is the leader of the prison break attempt. But before everything kicked off, she was arrested by the security forces in their attempts to kind of cut off the prisoners' attempt to riot. If the players are able to bring her to the green area, she can actually put in a code to disable the weapons. But again, until she's with the other prisoners, she will try to hide the fact that she's their leader, because once she's with the other prisoners, the surviving prisoners, she'll use them as leverage to get what she wants. She will also ask for a gun. It's not a good idea to give Zabrina a gun. She's not a danger to the players, but she is a danger to some of the other NPCs. If one of the players' personal motivations are looking for someone, there's a chance they're in this solitary confinement cell. So this is one of the good spots to resolve that. Once the players are ready to head towards the red area, which turns out to be the warden's armory and the security's barrack, they can bypass the defenses either by cutting it off from the power station. Alternatively, if they go to the prison first, some of the prisoners will be able to tell the players how to reach one of the major power lines and cut it to this area, as this is what the prisoners were planning to do themselves during their prison escape. Regardless of how the players deactivate the armory's defenses, once the players go in, they can start to see signs of a lot of fighting. A lot of these security turrets that are heavily damaged, as if something or someone has been desperately trying to get past all of these defenses. After passing all of this damage, the players eventually arrive upon the warden's armory, where the warden himself is currently shooting anything that comes anywhere near him. So the Warden's barricade fight initially looks like this. You have the player's deployment zone, you have a pair of gun turret objectives guarded by some of these security forces, you have a minefield behind that, and then behind that is the armory itself, on top of which is the Warden in his own mech, who is going to be shooting at everything and everybody every round. So how this encounter works is the objective are the pair of guns, which are starting to come back online due to some backup power activating. And so the players need to take control of these points so that they're not gunned down when these turrets come back online. For the minefield, how I envision handling it is for every space you walk on, you roll a d6, and on a 5 or 6, you take 1d6 explosive damage. But there's also the bonus objective of either taking out the Warden or getting next to him, both of which will cause him to immediately eject out of his mech and climb into the building below. On either side of the building, there are these two other objective points. These are actually lifts. The idea being if you reach them, you can, as a free action, go straight up to the top of the building. This is just in case if anybody wants to go for the Warden, but they don't have like the ability to fly or climb easily. When the players first deploy on the map, the Warden will be kind of screaming and crying out that they won't get him. He won't become one of them. He seems to think they're monsters, basically, and is just screaming, firing as much as he can down into them. And as the fight progresses, it quickly becomes clear why he thinks this. Now, depending on how successful you think the party can be or have been, you can either have the enemy reinforcements appear at the start of the second round or the start of the third round. Regardless of when you decide to bring them in, make sure to inform your players that from behind where they came, there's the sounds of things being torn apart and movement beginning to follow them to this location. As it turns out that all of those turrets we just deactivated were the only thing keeping some of the infected monsters from getting to this position. So the objective twists into you need to get control of the turrets, not only so they don't shoot you, but so they can gun down these monsters coming after you. The reinforcements deployment is the player's deployment. And this is a little mean, but this is a horror game. We can be a little mean. The enemies that then follow after the players look like this. The small units are legionnaires, which means they only have a movement and a single quick action, which means that they will primarily be focused on getting to the turrets unless something gets in their way. Meanwhile, the necromancer is going to be resurrecting them into thralls in order to continue applying pressure onto the objectives. This essentially becomes a holdout against a zombie horde. Ideally, you want the players to have taken out the security mechs before these other things appear, because they're technically like against each other. But if there's still some of them around, you can either have them help out the players by taking pot shots at this horde, or you can be a bit mean and say they prioritize the players because they were the first to arrive, or that they quickly become infected themselves and turn. And of course, the Warden will be using his bombard cannon to hit as many targets as possible. And unless the players are able to do an amazing roll or something to convince him not to shoot them, try to include at least one player in each of these massively damaging blasts. Because this kind of becomes a holdout, don't be afraid to keep pouring in new reinforcements of these creatures in order to keep up the pressure on the players. But feel free to end the fight either after round 4 or until round 6 once it becomes clear that the players have kind of got a control of the situation. Once the players have secured the outside of the armory, they just need to break in and find out where the warden has gone. They will eventually find the warden in the kind of garage area where the mechs would be holed up, and he's in front of some very large cargo crate with a tablet kind of attached to the side of it, and he is furiously tapping this tablet, and it keeps giving like an error back to him. As it turns out, this large cargo container holds the second reactor from the power plant because it has been converted into a nuclear bomb, and the warden is trying to activate it right now. Now, fortunately for the players, the warden, despite knowing the code, can't actually activate the detonation because it's geo-locked. It has to be detonated at a specific location, which turns out to be a lake deep beneath the secret lab area. If the players are able to calm the warden down, he can tell them that the scientists were working with some kind of lake, a big body of water deep underground, and that when things started going really wrong, he was given a command from upper management to begin this Operation Meltdown. He took his team, secured the second reactor, converted it into a bomb, and then took it to the secret lab. But when they got there, it was overflowing with monsters. The buildings themselves had begun to transform and had begun to grow flesh. His team was quickly overwhelmed by this and began to transform themselves. So the warden took the bomb and fled, bunkering himself up in the armory. Now, depending on the sequence the players get to this point, if this is one of the first locations they've gone to, then the warden tells them that a scientist tried to seal them into the secret lab area and has the code for opening it up, who can be found with the prisoners. Alternatively, if this is the second area the players have investigated, then the warden has the key card to the lab area, and he's the one that sealed his own team in order to escape. If Sabrina is with the party, she will want to kill the warden for all that he has done to her and the other prisoners. It's very obvious that the warden is kind of a reprehensible person. They've obviously been treating the prisoners very badly, and they're very likely doing like unethical experiments upon them. So it's kind of up to the players how they want to administer justice, if any. When the players head towards the green area, to get past the defenses here, they can either have Sabrina put in a code to shut them down, they could use the power plant to turn off the power here, or alternatively, they could even find an armored car in the warden's barracks, which they could use to smash through these defenses. Because this area isn't as well defended as the red area, though, it is possible with a good enough idea the players could get past these weapons. Once the players are in the prison area itself, it's obvious that this place is completely deserted as well. There's no signs of any life whatsoever. However, they come to the top of the solitary confinement dig site, where in the center of the map there is a hole, which has an elevator which can be called up. But scans of the area show that the elevator is currently not powered, but there are energy signatures all over this place. So how this sitrep works is each of these zones that have light or a difficult terrain are possible objective locations. Whenever a player ends their turn in one of these areas, roll a d6. On a 6, they find one of the discarded power cores for the elevator, and then just have to bring it back to the center of the map in order to call the elevator. But any other result means they didn't find it there and they have to look in a different location. But every time they search a new location, the dice roll becomes easier. So the second time it's on a 5+, then after that it's a 4+, and so on until they find it. The horror element of this map is we'll be using the blackout rule from Enhanced Combat, but with a very minor tweak. Enemy positions are not revealed on the map until either A, they step into a light, B, they do something hostile, or C, a player moves within free spaces of them. So this fight can get a little spooky because you're wandering around with your mechs, not really sure what you're about to run into. You can also see there's all these extra pits around the map. These are all possible enemy ingress zones. So if the players are taking too long, you can start bringing enemy reinforcements from these holes. As for the enemies themselves, this is their starting positions. When the players first bump into the enemies on this map, it turns out that they are kind of these broken and worn down mining mechs. But they're moving erratically and with incredible hostility. Now, it might occur to the players to try to make contact with the pilots of these things to try to calm them down or try to reason with them. But if they do make a communication connection with them, all they see on the other side of the screen is a mummified corpse. All of these pilots are dead already, their last words screaming out of their machines. And it is not entirely clear if the mechs are just running on autopilot, if they have been infected and controlled by whatever horror is occurring here, or if they are just actually ghosts out to get them. So because the enemy don't become revealed immediately, we can use a lot of like slow enemies. And so the danger becomes accidentally like bumping into one. For example, these pair of morning stars who explode upon you, but have a hard time catching up to you if you just run away from them. And then with these berserkers in the mix to kind of catch people out as the party kind of separates searching for this power core. You can also immediately raise the tension in the fight. You can have the sniper take its turn first and just perform a lock-on to somebody in order to kind of threaten them with a structure immediately. One of the real dangers of this map, of course, is the monstrous spectre that will be running around in the darkness. Now, this little guy is the horror monster of this sitrep, and you want to have him jump someone when they're all alone and think they're relatively safe. So don't be afraid to kind of hold him back in the dark until you find the perfect opportunity to horror jump scare the party. Once the players have installed the power core into the elevator, you can bring the elevator up. And then once again, the sitrep becomes an extraction. Everybody needs to jump on the elevator and have it descend as quickly as possible. When the players descend the elevator into the tunnels below, they're first met by blinding floodlights and a line of basic mining mechs armed with guns. These are clearly some of the surviving prisoners, and the players just need to quickly establish they're friendly. If they have Sabrina with them, this becomes much easier. Once the tensions have cooled, the players can make their way past these defenders to where the rest of the survivors are. And there's a good chunk of prisoners down here who weren't involved in whatever happened to the colony at large, and so had the opportunity to escape down here. It's obvious to anyone examining them that they've been down here for a number of days now, probably with very little food and water, so there's a bit of disorientation going around. If asked, the prisoners will be able to explain that the creatures that were attacking seem to, while not harmed by light, don't really like bright lights. So they've been using the lights and their weapons to take down any that find their way down the elevator. The broken down and haunted minor mechs the players saw above were some of the braver prisoners who stayed behind to try to protect the others, and must have torn out the elevator's power source at some point during their defense. Now, while the players are down here, there are two locations of note. A little area filled with a small amount of people wearing suits and normal outfits, but are being guarded by some of the prisoners. They're clearly being held hostage for the time being, but the prisoners in their kind of weakened state won't stop the players from checking them out or speaking with them. Representing these people in suits is a man called Mr. Brighton. Mr. Brighton, upon seeing the players, will try to gesture for them to come talk to him as soon as possible. He describes himself as a lawyer working for Glacial Corp, and if pressed, he will suggest his job was to make sure that the use of the prisoners was following proper regulations. Of course, it's very obvious that this place has not been following any sort of legal framework for the use of these prisoners. In whispered conversation, Brighton will tell the players his concern about the prisoners and how he's worried for his and the others' safety. If Sabrina had come along with the players, Brighton will get even more worried, as he considers her a bloodthirsty killer. So as subtly as he can, he will try to arrange a deal with the players to evacuate him and the other normal workers of the colony out of here first, and to do it in such a way that the rest of the prisoners are trapped down here for the time being. He will make the case that despite the terrible situation, many of these criminals are dangerous, and that he's really worried they're going to take out their frustrations on them. Of course, he's actually worried they're going to take their frustrations out on him personally, and he will try to bribe the players. He knows where the security forces left some of their equipment, and he will gladly tell the players where it is as soon as they can guarantee his safe exit. If the players have brought Sabrina to this location, then she very quickly takes over the prisoners. They're all happy to see her back and happy to see somebody they trust. So she is able to deal with any issues that might arise with the prisoners. And she's even able to offer a possible reserve for the players. They have some of the security forces' sniper rifles, so during an encounter they could offer some firing support. However, she has a condition for this help. She wants the players to leave the suited people, as well as Mr. Brighton, with her and the prisoners for safekeeping. Now, anyone with any sort of ability to read the room can tell that Sabrina is definitely going to kill these people if they leave them with her. She can be talked down from kind of killing the normal civilians. She will agree to that. But Brighton, no matter what argument the players make or deal they make with her, if they leave Brighton anywhere near Sabrina, he will not survive. The other location of importance is the hospital area, much further away from the other survivors. Is a dark tunnel where they kind of put all of the obviously infected people, and that there is a scientist with them kind of administering first aid as best he can. When the players get to this little hospital area, which is just an open cave with some curtains, what they see is all of the patients, there's nothing wrong with them. They don't show signs of illness or injury. Instead, all of them are laying on the ground, their ear pressed down to the floor as if trying to listen to something far below, and nothing the players can do can break them out of this strange stupor. Dr. Williams is going from each of the patients, just trying to deliver them what little water he can. Dr. Williams is one of the original scientists that worked in Oklaw before Glacial Corp moved in. So he will be able to give the players some background on the colony if they haven't already learnt some of these details. The colony was originally set up as a stepping stone for settling a more habitable planet, and that the resources extracted here could then be used to help build up a new, better colony for all of the workers that came here, hence the messaging about building a better future. Now, the planet itself is basically a giant dead rock. Other than the ores here, there's really nothing else going on. But during some of the extraction, they came across a lake of black water deep underground. At the time, this was kind of considered a miraculous discovery, because if there was water on this rock, then it might have been more habitable than it appeared. And so Dr. Williams was one of the scientists brought on board to see how viable the water would be for use. He mainly worked in hydroponics, so began experimenting to see if the water was suitable for growing plants with, for example. His own studies concluded that it was, by all chemical appearance, pure H2O, just water. The odd colorization seemed from his studies just to be a result of mixed in sediment from the local rock. But it soon became apparent to him and the other scientists that there was something else going on with this water, because the plants they grew with it grew rapidly and very healthy. Before he was able to identify exactly what was causing this effect, the miners began to show symptoms of some form of insanity. Miners would complain about hearing voices. Some would walk off mid-conversation, and others still disappeared into the tunnels, never to be seen again. The workers went on strike about the conditions and this sickness that had been going around and demanded answers. And when the founder and the scientists weren't able to produce any, the workers left. The founder became desperate to replace the workers, as it put the whole project in jeopardy, and he went around trying to sell the colony to various corporations, but nobody was really interested. But then he ran into Glacial Corp, who were not really interested in the mine itself. They were much more interested in this strange water. And so the founder got into a kind of devil's bargain with Glacial Corp. They would produce workers, and in exchange, he would allow them to basically have free reign to do any sort of research they wanted. Dr. Williams stayed behind because he was still fascinated by the water and wanted to continue his own research on it, but Glacial Corp took all of his notes and basically excluded him from the main research area, as they began to build their own secret lab beside the colony. Dr. Williams isn't 100% sure what went on in that laboratory. He was never given access to it. But when the outbreak started, it began with a noise. It is difficult for him to describe the noise. He has trouble and doesn't even want to think about that noise. But when it sounded, people across the colony that heard it began to transform. Parts of mechs started to transform. Parts of buildings started to transform, all melt and meld together. Flesh, steel, cement into great creatures that began devouring everything they could get their hands on. The warden sent out an order across the security team to just wipe out all organic matter. The security CompCon units immediately opening fire across the whole colony. If this is the second location the players visit, then Dr. Williams does have a key card for opening the lab. In the confusion, he managed to grab it, and he tried to seal up the secret lab in order to stop whatever this was from spreading any further. But if this is the first location the players visit, Dr. Williams can tell them that it was the warden who sealed the secret lab and that he should have the access card. Before the players are done speaking with Dr. Williams, they might begin to notice that he keeps looking away. Every now and again he looks down and then very quickly looks back up, tries to focus on something else. He's obviously in some state himself. If pressed on the matter, Dr. Williams can reveal that he is infected. He knows for a fact. He has studied the infection long enough to know its various stages. Stage 1 of the infection. The victim begins to hear a voice. The voice is almost like a language, but it's more like a compulsion, like a dreadful feeling of something being with you and wanting you to come to it. And the infected can always tell the origin of this voice comes from below. The second stage of the infection is on display for the players in this cave. The infected become consumed by listening to this voice and enter a near comatose state, but do nothing but try to get closer to it. The infected here are all lying on the ground in this stupor because there is no way out of the cavern. Unable to reach whatever it is calling to them, they just go catatonic. Dr. Williams can admit he knows for sure he's exhibiting symptoms of stage 1, but that he also has another revelation for the players. He is certain that all of the surviving prisoners are almost certainly infected as well, and that if they come into contact with this sound, the consequences could be devastating. But he will also tell them that the people in suits and the normal outfits are not infected. He knows this because the company had some sort of device, an inoculator, that they had many of their workers pass through in order to decontaminate them. He isn't sure how it worked. It was a semi-large boxy implement with lots of satellite towers on it, small enough that you could carry it in 2 arms. The device he was aware of became damaged during the outbreak, so if there are any more, they're probably in the secret lab. Once the players are done with the prisoner survivor area, they can actually go back up the elevator, as all of the dead and creatures up there are gone now. With the barricade of weapons disabled, everything that used to be here has now escaped and left for the tunnels, making the passage back up disquietingly safe. Alternatively, if the elevator has become damaged or the players really don't want to go back up there, the prisoners do have a tunnel they were making when they were first planning their prison escape, which leads back up to the Connolly. It was never finished though, but with some of the mining equipment left behind, the players could complete the tunnel and get back to the main area. Once the warden's barricade encounter and the prisoner encounter have both been resolved, the players will have the access card to open the way to the secret laboratory. Before they do, they might take an opportunity to rest and recuperate a little bit, but in addition, if they completed that bonus objective of taking out the anti-air guns outside, it's at this point a shot up, mostly broken truck has wheeled itself into the center of the Connolly. The truck has no driver, but it bears the symbol of the ship up in orbit the players came from, and it contains the extra supplies that the Admiral has been able to send through despite all the fighting happening outside against the AI units. Now, depending how well your players have done, if they need more repairs, this is a good opportunity to get them. Alternatively, you could provide a one-time use reserve to boost up their weapons for this or the final encounter. So when the players are finally ready to get to the secret lab, all they need to do is go to the south of the Connolly, and then using the key card, they can open up the secret cavern wall hiding the entrance. As the players descend this dark industrial tunnel, there is something like the noise of a heartbeat. Ba-bum, 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 echoing out from the distance. Around the corner, as they get closer and closer to the secret lab, they begin to see a soft red glow. What the players find at the end of that tunnel is writhing pieces of flesh growing out of, growing from the buildings themselves. And at the center of it all is some sort of tower, which at its peak has a beating heart, which begins to emit an unearthly sound. The objective of this sitrep is very straightforward. From the player's deployment zone, all they have to do is take control of this tower in the center. But taking control of the tower is not the win condition. The win condition is eliminating all enemy forces. What controlling the tower does is prevent the sound from emitting out. At the end of each round, where the players do not control this center objective, then each of the pilots takes 2 damage as the sound begins to carry the infection into their very bodies. Though depending on how you like to run your games, you can alternatively change this to 1 damage if you need it to be a little on the lighter end. Or alternatively, you can make it that it causes everyone to gain 2 heat every turn. They don't control it. If the point is just contested, as in there are an equal amount of player characters and enemy characters in the zone, then the bad effect still happens. They have to control it in order to prevent it from occurring. And then the players must take out what remains of the Warden's security team and the NHP, which has become corrupted by the infection. Unlike the previous encounters, this sitrep has no enemy reinforcements. So instead, all of the enemies have an extra structure from veterancy or from being an elite in the case of the NHP in the back. And in addition, they all have the horror template. The encounter itself is all about taking control of the center point and making it as difficult as possible to retake it. The barricade at the top is quite tanky, but has the nasty surprise of having the assimilation maw to attack anybody that comes too close to it. Meanwhile, the breacher is kind of there as a nasty surprise for anybody that relies on invisibility or keeping at the back line, as he can get there very quickly, ignores invisibility, and can pour in a load of damage from being able to do improvised attacks as a quick action and to grapple more easily. The cataphract's job, of course, is to keep people off of the point by dragging them out. But if you're feeling a little mean, you could say that their phase shift generator, which turns them intangible, also turns anyone they're grappling intangible as well, as if ripping them out of reality to try to consume them. Last but not least is NHP Echidna, which at this point has only just become a vehicle for the infection. If it gets out from this point, the infection cannot be stopped anymore. Not even NHPs seem to be immune to whatever this is. As a witch, it focuses on being a witch, granting as much heat as possible, causing disruption, and using its innate ability to move at the start of its turn from floating to just move around the battlefield away from hazards in order to be as much of a problem as possible. And because it's an elite, it could administer a lot of heat very quickly if it is not taken down. Once the encounter is concluded, this is also a good opportunity for any secret objectives, whether it be to take something into the colony or take something out. This is a good place to kind of trigger that objective, which could be something like recovering the NHP, scanning the NHP, or even doing something to the NHP. The players might also want to destroy this evil signal tower thing. And now that its broadcast has been kind of halted, should be able to do safely with an explosive or just a determined amount of firepower. The interior of the lab buildings have all been torn to pieces by the transformation that has occurred, but all of this newly grown flesh is now dead or dying, whether that's from the destruction of the NHP, the destruction of the signal tower, or something else is unclear. But between all the wreckage and the gore, a picture begins to emerge. Throughout this facility, there are little isolated lab areas. Some of them contain heaps of flesh knitted together. Others contain burnt shadows of something that was there before, while others contain weird black cubes all kind of piled up together in a little pyramid. Eventually, the players will find a lab that is in the kind of best condition and still maybe even has a little bit of electricity flowing through it. Within this lab, they will even find one of the inoculator devices that Dr. Williams spoke about. So if any of the players are infected or concerned about being infected, they can turn this on, and while it's not visible, it does remove the infection from them in a small radius around this device. If the players investigate the computers, they can fix them up or hack them or whatever they need to do to get access. Upon getting access, they will see that there is a series of video files that seem to be records of a scientist. And it is through these videos that the full picture of what has happened becomes revealed. The first video appears to have been taken during the early days of this experimentation. The discovery of this strange water, which seems to have the ability to help biological matter grow and repair. They might remark about how the company is interested if this could have medical uses on, say, a battlefield. The scientist will reveal that they have been taking samples from the lake below and experimenting with them on biological substances, including some of the prisoners. Later videos show the advancement of this research as they have begun to conclude that the strange particle that is embedded in the water that causes these transformations, the reason it can't be detected is because it doesn't exist in this reality, but it does exist in a parallel dimension. Peculiarly, the scientist will note that this particle cannot survive beyond the lake for very long. Its half-life begins to rapidly decay once some of the water is removed from the lake. The inoculator was eventually designed to create a kind of pulse that speeds up this half-life in order to make sure they can clean the particle from anything they didn't want it in. The extent of this infection is caused by the use of this water in the hydroponics. All the food everyone has been eating has been laced with this strange particle and infecting them. For the most part, it has had little to no effect, but in some people it seems to trigger this strange psychosis, which they are still in the middle of investigating. A later video starts with the scientist looking more concerned. As it turns out, the company Glacial Corp is unhappy with the pace of the research. The scientists have been unable to solve why the particle begins to disintegrate when it leaves the lake, and so are having trouble creating like a viable product to use from it. Another video, with the scientist looking more tired now, has them admit that there's been speculation going around the lab that the particle might be part of some sort of living organism, that it has either some sort of instinct to bring subjects it infects to a healthy condition, or an intent to do so. But the scientist kind of dismisses this as an unsubstantiated theory. Eventually a video plays where the scientist is looking completely distraught. They look like they've just come back from something horrible, as they begin to describe that the company became interested in what would happen if they took one of the heavily infected prisoners down to the lake. And the scientist can't bring himself to describe what happened, and then kind of cuts off the video saying he has to talk to the lawyer. The very last video has the scientist in kind of ground zero of the outbreak. Horrible noises are playing in the background. Pass outside the building, the scientist saying he's only been able to stay safe because of the inoculator, and reveals that under duress from Glacial Corp, they introduced the particle to nanomachines, and that over the course of a number of weeks, the particle began to learn how to use them. In a kind of dawning horror, the scientist begins to muse that instead of them experimenting on the particle, he begins to suspect that the particle was experimenting with how to alter their flesh, and now it knows how to alter their machines. He then says Operation Meltdown has been activated, as the lake has to be completely destroyed in its entirety to make sure whatever is down there does not escape, because it has been taking all of the material, whether it be biological or machine, down to the lake in order to try to build something, as if it is trying to build a body. The scientist then remarks that he won't be part of this, that he won't let it take him. And then off screen, he walks away, you hear a door close, and you hear him ask the computer to begin the incineration process. After the players are done exploring the lab, they have a moment of rest to kind of settle on what they're going to do next. Now, the pieces have obviously been set up for them, because what they obviously have to do is take the nuclear device down the elevator in the lab to the lake, put it in the lake, set it to detonate, and then leave. Before they set on this venture, they might want to talk to any of the survivors, maybe set up the inoculator to start getting the worst people treated, or anything else they want to do. Maybe even try to boost a signal up to the ship in order to kind of get any kind of message out about what's going on. But regardless, once the players are ready, they can get into the elevator and start descending down towards the lake. As the elevator finally reaches deep, deep under the rock, the players are met by the sight of a massive lake of black water. In the very center of it, an obelisk has started to rise out of the water. emitting a terrible, unearthly glow. Just looking at it makes the players' heads hurt, like it just shouldn't be. Now this sitrep, after all of the other ones, is a bit more cinematic in nature, as by default it only has one enemy, the big boss. This sitrep is a straightforward one, as it is just an escort. You have to take the nuclear device and place it in an adjacent space next to the obelisk. Once the nuclear device is placed, you can also ask your player how many turns are they going to leave it until it explodes, in order to raise the dramatic stakes even higher, as they have to get to the deployment zone so they can get back to the elevator in order to escape the blast. The black water is an environmental hazard. It first causes anyone who enters it to become slowed, but also, in addition, at the end of any player's turn where they're still in the water, they must make a system save. If they fail to roll 10 or higher, then they immediately gain 1d6 heat, as whatever the water is made out of begins to try to infect the player's mech. Once all the players have chosen their deployment areas and chosen where the nuclear device is starting, you can reveal the enemy encounter. Rising up out of the water like a malformed serpent or even a spine, the players are faced with what lies beneath. For this encounter, I tend to only use the Monstrosity Ultra, because it has various abilities to help it survive a lot of concentrated fire, but also just to make the whole thing very cinematic in nature. I tend to play it like it is some kind of creature with some level of understanding, but not a complete one. It recognizes that the players are a threat and will go for whoever is deepest in the lake towards the obelisk, but it won't recognize that the nuclear device is the threat and will kind of ignore it. But if you feel like you want to add some extra challenge to this fight, you could easily add any of the previous encounters rising out of the lake. Towards the end of this encounter, don't be afraid to remind your players about the eject function if it doesn't seem like they're willing to use it, because an extra 6 spaces could easily get you out of that lake and back into the deployment zone. What lies beneath has a few slightly custom abilities in order to make it a little bit more dangerous and to also give it its extra flavor. So for example, it has a cone attack that shreds targets, so it is easily able to bypass armor and resistances. It has Argus armor in order to kind of give it that feeling of a boss you kind of have to peel apart, and it has a unique protocol ability that on recharge that can force the players to move into the lake. So if there's anybody sticking to the back or hesitantly standing at the coast, it can use this ability to pull them in. Due to its strange nature, it also ignores intangible. It can always be targeted, and it can always target someone intangible. But if anyone tries to make it intangible, it just becomes slowed instead. The final thing to note about this boss is, regardless of what happens, it doesn't seem to be able to physically leave the lake. Whatever this thing is, the lake appears to be some kind of prison containing it, stopping it from escaping out into the wider universe. Once everything has been resolved, assuming the players are still alive, we can begin the epilogue. As you go over the player's actions and decisions and how it has affected the survivors, whether there are any survivors, and whether or not the situation has been handled, and of course the current state of the players themselves. The Admiral will see them all at the end of the mission to give them their congratulations and their debrief on the situation in however they want to explain it. Although if any of the players did die during the mission and kept it hidden, this is a kind of perfect point for the Admiral to walk up to them, salute them for their sacrifice, and then for the pilot to take off their helmet, revealing the skeleton underneath. All of that then leads us to the conclusion of the mission. For the rest of the video then, I'll just display the kind of bullet point information about each of the parts and characters as the final overview of the mission. Although in the aftermath, your players and yourself might be left with some lingering questions, like who are Glacial Corp? What did they want from this really? And what was that creature and why was it trapped there? The answers to these questions will actually be in my campaign book, currently codenamed Lancer Cyberpunk. Thank you for listening to the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you run the mission, do let me know how it goes. This is Jim, signing off. Thank you all very much.